My daughter hung up on me after I asked what time to arrive at my grandson's birthday party. 2 hours later, she texted, "Don't come. Margaret wants to be the only grandmother there." I stared at that message for exactly 3 minutes before I started laughing. Then I picked up my phone and made a call that would change everything. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. Sitting in my living room in Portland, Oregon, holding a text message that felt like a slap across the face. Because this story didn't start with Sarah's cruelty. It started 3 weeks ago when she called me crying. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been enjoying my morning coffee when my phone rang. Sarah's number flashed on the screen, and something in my chest tightened. My daughter only called me when she wanted something these days. "Mom," she sobbed before I could even say hello. "I don't know what to do. David lost his job." I set down my coffee cup carefully. David, my son-in-law, was one of those men who thought he was God's gift to the corporate world while barely managing to keep any position longer than 18 months. This would be his 4th job loss in 5 years. "What happened this time?" I asked, though I already knew it would be someone else's fault. "Budget cuts," Sarah hiccuped. "They let go of half the marketing department. It's so unfair, Mom. David was their best performer." Sure he was. I'd heard this song before. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. That's tough. Jake's party is in 3 weeks," Sarah continued, her voice rising with panic. "We already sent the invitation. We booked the venue at Riverside Event Center. We put down deposits for the catering, the bounce house, the DJ, everything." And there it was. I could practically hear the dollar signs in her voice. "How much are we talking about, Sarah?" "5,000, she whispered. "Mom, I know it's a lot, but we can't cancel. Jake's been so excited. He's told all his friends about the big party. We can't disappoint him. $5,000 for an 8-year-old's birthday party." When Sarah was 8, we celebrated with a homemade cake and pinned the tail on the donkey in our backyard. But times had changed, apparently, and my grandson deserved better than what his grandmother had been able to provide. "Please, Mom," Sarah begged. "You know we'll pay you back as soon as David finds something new." That was another song I'd heard before. The loan for their wedding that never got repaid. The emergency car repair that became my gift. The down payment on their house that I apparently should consider my contribution to my grandson's future. But Jake's sweet face flashed in my mind. My grandson, who called me Nana and always hugged me like he meant it. Who deserved better than parents who spent money they didn't have on maintaining appearances? "Let me think about it," I said. "Mom, please. The party is 3 weeks away. If we're going to cancel, we need to know now." I closed my eyes. "I'll cover it." The relief in Sarah's voice was palpable. "Thank you. Oh, Mom, thank you so much. You're saving us. Just promise me one thing," I said. "This is for Jake. Not for show, not to impress your neighbors, for my grandson." "Of course. Everything is for Jake. You're the best mom in the world." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my checkbook. $5,000 was a significant chunk of my retirement savings, but Jake was worth it. He was the bright spot in my relationship with Sarah and David, the one pure thing that hadn't been tainted by their constant financial drama and social climbing. I wrote the check that afternoon and hand-delivered it to Sarah's house. She hugged me and promised it would be the most beautiful party Jake ever had. David wasn't home, which was probably for the best. My son-in-law had a way of making even gratitude feel like an insult. The next 2 weeks passed quietly. Sarah called once to update me on the party planning, her voice bright with excitement as she described the custom decorations and the petting zoo they'd hired. I smiled and made appropriate sounds of enthusiasm, but something nagged at me. It was the way she talked about the party, like it was more about her than about Jake. "Everyone's going to be so impressed," she kept saying. "Margaret's been bragging about the parties she throws for her grandkids, but this will show her." Margaret, David's mother, who lived in Seattle and visited twice a year with an armload of expensive gifts and a superior attitude. The woman who never failed to mention her country club memberships and charity board positions, who once told me that my little apartment was quaint in a tone that made the word sound like an insult. "I'm sure Jake will have a wonderful time," I said carefully. "Oh, he will. And so will everyone else. Margaret's flying in for it, of course. She said she couldn't miss her only grandchild's birthday." Only grandchild. As if I didn't exist. I let it pass. I'd learned over the years that defending myself against Margaret's subtle digs only made Sarah defensive of her mother-in-law. Some battles weren't worth fighting, especially when Jake's happiness was at stake. But that should have been my first warning. The second warning came when Sarah called me 3 days before the party. "Mom, can you help me with something?" "Of course. I need you to pick up the birthday cake. The bakery called and said they need payment on pickup, but I'll be running around all morning getting everything else ready." Another errand, another expense. The cake hadn't been mentioned in the original 5,000, but I agreed because that's what grandmothers do. "Also," Sarah added, almost as an afterthought, "could you get there early to help set up? Maybe around noon? The party doesn't start until 2, but I I want everything perfect before the guests arrive. What time should I be there? I just said noon. The party starts at 2. No, I mean, what time should I arrive as a guest after I help set up? There was a pause, a small one, barely noticeable. But I'd been Sarah's mother for 35 years. I knew all her pauses. Well, you'll already be there, she said with a laugh that sounded forced. That's when the third warning hit me. The one I should have seen coming from the moment Sarah started gushing about impressing Margaret, but I didn't see it. Not until the morning of the party, when I called Sarah to confirm what time I should arrive. Hi, Mom, Sarah answered, and her voice was different, strained. Hi, sweetheart. I'm getting ready to head over. Should I bring anything besides the cake? About that, Sarah started, then stopped. About what? Another pause, longer this time. Mom, I need to tell you something. Margaret flew in yesterday, and she and I were talking about the party arrangements. My stomach dropped. What kind of arrangements? She pointed out that having too many grandparents there might be confusing for the kids. You know, they won't understand the family dynamic. The family dynamic? And she suggested, well, she offered to handle all the grandmother duties for the party. She brought Jake this amazing gift, and she's been helping with the setup. And, Sarah, are you telling me not to come to my own grandson's birthday party? It's not like that. It's just, Margaret thinks it would be less complicated if there was only one grandmother there, just for this party. Less complicated for who? Please don't make this harder than it already is. You know how Margaret gets when she feels like her territory is being encroached on. Her territory. My grandson had become territory to be claimed. I paid for this party, Sarah, and we're so grateful, but that doesn't mean, you understand, right? It's better for Jake if there's no awkwardness. I understood perfectly. I understood that my $5,000 was welcome, but my presence was not. I understood that I had been relegated to the role of silent benefactor, while Margaret claimed the spotlight as the only grandmother who mattered. I see, I said quietly. You're not mad, are you? I knew you'd understand. You're always so reasonable about these things. That word, reasonable, it was what people called you when they expected you to swallow insults with a smile. I'm not mad, I said, and it was true. I wasn't mad. I was something else entirely. Great. I'll send you pictures, and maybe we can have Jake over next weekend for a private celebration, just the three of us. Just the three of us. After Margaret had been publicly acknowledged as the real grandmother at the party I had funded. That sounds nice, I said. You're the best, Mom. I love you. After she hung up, I sat in my living room holding my phone. The silence stretched around me like a weight. 35 years of motherhood, 8 years of grandmotherhood, reduced to a checkbook and a backup plan. That's when I started laughing. The laughter started small, just a chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Then it grew into something bigger, something that came from deep in my chest and shook my whole body. I laughed until tears ran down my cheeks, until my sides ached, until I could barely breathe. Because really, what else was there to do? I had been magnificently played, not just by Sarah, but by the entire situation I had allowed myself to be maneuvered into over the years. The ever-helpful mother, the always understanding grandmother, the woman who wrote checks and ran errands and stepped aside whenever it was convenient for everyone else. When had I become this person? I thought back to who I used to be, Helen Patricia Morrison, before I was Sarah's mother or Jake's grandmother. I had been the office manager at a busy law firm for 23 years. I had handled attorneys' egos and clients' crises and administrative chaos with efficiency and steel. I had been respected, valued, irreplaceable. That woman never would have let someone spend her money and then ban her from the event she had funded. But somehow, over the years, I had morphed into this softer version of myself, this accommodating woman who prioritized family harmony over her own dignity, who swallowed disappointments rather than cause conflict. Well, that woman was about to retire. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. James Patterson, not the novelist. This James Patterson was a private investigator I had worked with during my years at the law firm. Sharp, thorough, and completely without sentiment when it came to uncovering uncomfortable truth. Helen Morrison, he said when he answered, recognition clear in his voice. It's been what, 5 years? 6, I corrected, since the Richardson case. Right, the cheating spouse. What can I do for you? Don't tell me you need someone investigated. I was quiet for a moment, considering my next words carefully. Actually, James, I do. I told him what I needed. It wasn't complicated, but it would require some finesse. James listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions that told me he understood exactly what I was asking for. When do you need this? He asked when I finished. Today, this afternoon specifically, around 2 o'clock. That's short notice. I can pay extra for the rush job. How much extra? I named a figure that made him whistle low. Helen, what exactly is going on here? Let's just say I'm making sure my grandson's birthday party has all the appropriate family representation. There was a pause while James processed this. Then he chuckled. You know what? I don't even need the details. Consider it done. Thank you, James. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see the result. After I hung up, I made my second call. This one to Riverside, Riverside Event Center. Hello, I said when the receptionist answered. I'm calling about the Morrison party this afternoon. I'm the grandmother who paid for the event. Oh yes, Mrs. Morrison. How can I help you? I just wanted to confirm that you received my specific instructions about the guest I'll be sending in my place. There was a pause. I'm sorry. What specific instructions? The ones I'm about to give you. I spent 10 minutes explaining exactly what I needed. The receptionist took notes and asked several questions to make sure she understood completely. By the end of the call, she was clearly intrigued. This is certainly unusual, she said. Yes, it is, but I trust you'll handle it professionally? Of course. We'll make sure everything goes exactly as you've requested. Perfect. And remember, this is a surprise for the family. My third call was the most satisfying. I dialed Jake's father's cell phone, knowing he would probably be running around doing last-minute party preparations. Hello? David answered, sounding harried. David, it's Helen. I wanted to let you know that I won't be able to attend Jake's party this afternoon after all. Oh, he sounded relieved, which confirmed everything I suspected about his role in Margaret's territorial grab. That's too bad. Jake will be disappointed. I'm sure Margaret will keep him distracted. However, I am sending someone in my place to represent me at the party. What do you mean, represent you? As the grandmother who made this party possible, I feel it's important to have a presence there. My representative will be arriving around 2:30 with a special gift for Jake. Helen, I don't think that's necessary. Sarah said you understood about the grandmother situation. Oh, I understand perfectly. That's exactly why I'm sending a representative. Someone who can properly acknowledge my contribution to Jake's special day. Who are you sending? I smiled, even though he couldn't see me. You'll know him when you see him, David. Trust me, it'll be very clear who he is and why he's there. Helen, wait, but I had already hung up. At exactly 2:15, I received a text from James Patterson. Package delivered. Proceeding as discussed. I was sitting in my living room with a cup of tea and the Saturday crossword puzzle, as calm as I had ever been in my life. Outside, Portland was enjoying one of those rare, perfect spring days when the rain stops long enough for everyone to remember why they live in Oregon. The sun streamed through my windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the warm air. My phone rang. Sarah's number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. I turned it face down on the coffee table and continued working on 17 across. Deserved payback. 7 letters. The answer came to me immediately. Justice. My phone buzzed with a text, then another, then another. I finished the crossword puzzle, my best Saturday time in months, before I picked up my phone to read the messages. Sarah, Mom, call me now. Sarah, what did you do? Sarah, this isn't funny, Mom, please call me. David, Helen, we need to talk about this situation. David, this is completely inappropriate. And then, the one that made me smile the widest. Unknown number. Mrs. Morrison, this is Margaret Caldwell. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Oh, there had been no misunderstanding at all. I poured myself another cup of tea and settled back into my chair to wait for the next development. It came 20 minutes later in the form of a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Morrison? This is Jennifer Walsh from Riverside Event Center. I wanted to let you know that your representative has arrived and is mingling with the guests. Everything is proceeding exactly as you requested. Wonderful. How are the hosts handling it? There was a pause, then a barely suppressed giggle. Well, let's just say it's created quite a stir. The birthday boy seems very excited though. He keeps asking questions. Good, that's exactly what I hoped for. Should I tell your representative anything specific? Just remind him to be thorough. I want everyone at that party to understand exactly who made it possible. Will do? And Mrs. Morrison, for what it's worth, I think what you're doing is brilliant. After I hung up, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Sometimes the best revenge was simply the truth, delivered at the most inconvenient possible moment. My phone rang again. This time it was Jake. Nana! His voice was bright with excitement. There's a man here at my party who says he knows you. Is there? Tell me about him, sweetheart. He's really nice. He brought me a present from you, and he's been telling everyone about how you paid for my whole party. Mommy looks funny, though. Her face is all red. I could picture Sarah's face. I had seen that particular shade of red many times over the years, usually when she was caught in some manipulation that backfired. Are you having a good time at your party, Jake? The best time. The bounce house is amazing, and the cake is huge, and there's a petting zoo with baby goats. Thank you for making my party happen, Nana. The man told me you used your special grandmother money to make sure I had the best birthday ever. You're welcome, sweetheart. You deserve a wonderful party. When are you coming? I want to show you the baby goat. I'm not going to be able to make it today, honey, but my friend is there to represent me, and he'll take lots of pictures for me. Okay, I love you, Nana. I love you too, Jake. Happy birthday. After Jake hung up, my phone immediately rang again. Sarah, of course. This time I answered. What the hell did you do? She hissed into the phone, clearly trying to keep her voice down. I sent a representative to Jake's party. I thought I made that clear. You sent a private investigator, Mom. A PI. He's telling everyone that he's here on behalf of the grandmother who funded the party because said grandmother was uninvited in favor of the other grandmother. Is that what he's saying? How thorough of him. This is humiliating. Margaret is mortified. David's parents are asking questions. Jake keeps announcing to everyone that you're the one who paid for everything. Well, I did pay for everything. I thought you'd appreciate Jake understanding where his special party came from. You're embarrassing our entire family. I'm simply making sure the facts are clear. You wanted only one grandmother at the party. Now everyone knows exactly which grandmother made the party possible. Mom, please, call him off. Tell him to leave. Oh, I can't do that, sweetheart. I hired him for the full event. He's very thorough. I imagine he'll be mingling and sharing information for at least another hour. Information? What information? I smiled into the phone. Just the facts, Sarah. The timeline of events, the financial details, the family dynamics that led to this situation. You know, context. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You planned this, Sarah finally whispered. I planned to make sure my grandson knew how much his Nana loves him and wanted to celebrate his special day. If that happens to clarify some family dynamics for your guests, well, that's just a bonus. Margaret wants to leave. That would be unfortunate. She flew all the way from Seattle for this. She's saying she's never been so insulted in her life. Really? I would have thought being confronted with the truth would be less insulting than living a lie. But perhaps Margaret has different standards than I do. Another long silence. I can't believe you did this to me, Sarah said, her voice thick with tears. And there it was. The thing that had been building between us for years, finally out in the open. I didn't do anything to you, Sarah. I did something for myself. For the first time in a very long time, I chose my own dignity over your comfort. If you find that inconvenient, perhaps you should examine why. You've ruined Jake's party. No, sweetheart. I paid for Jake's party. You're the one who decided to make it a battlefield. I hung up before she could respond. At 4:30, James Patterson called to give me his report. Mission accomplished, he said, and I could hear the amusement in his voice. That was the most entertaining job I've had all year. Tell me everything. Well, I arrived right on schedule and introduced myself to the event coordinator as your representative. She was fantastic, by the way, really played her part. She announced to the host that the grandmother who had funded the party had sent a special representative since she couldn't attend personally. How did they react? Your daughter turned white as a sheet. The son-in-law started stammering about how there must be some misunderstanding. But the other grandmother, Margaret, I think, she stepped right up and demanded to know who I was and what I wanted. I settled deeper into my chair. And so I explained that I was there on behalf of Helen Morrison, the maternal grandmother who had generously funded the entire celebration but had been asked not to attend so that Margaret could be the only grandmother present. I said I was there to ensure that Mrs. Morrison's contribution was properly acknowledged. How did Margaret take that? James chuckled. Not well. She started sputtering about inappropriate behavior and misunderstanding. So I pulled out my notebook and started reading off the timeline. Date of the request for funds. Amount provided. Date of the disinvitation. The works. In front of everyone? Well, people were naturally curious about what was happening, and I'm a very thorough professional. When people asked questions, I answered them completely and accurately. I could picture the scene. Margaret's horror, Sarah's humiliation, David's panic. It was everything I had hoped for. What about Jake? That kid's a treasure, Helen. He was fascinated by the whole thing, kept asking if I knew his Nana, telling me all about how much he loves you. I gave him the gift you selected, that remote control airplane, and told him it was from his Nana, who wanted to make sure his special day was perfect. How did he react? He lit up like Christmas morning, started telling everyone within earshot that his Nana Helen was the best grandmother in the world and that she had paid for his whole party because she loved him so much. The other kids were impressed. Several parents came over to ask me to convey their thanks to you for such a wonderful party for their children. I felt tears prick my eyes, but they were good tears. Jake understood. My grandson knew he was loved, and that was what mattered most. What happened at the end? Well, things got a bit tense between your daughter and Margaret. I couldn't hear all of it, but there was definitely some heated discussion about family dynamics and respect and who was overstepping boundaries. Margaret left early, claiming she had a headache. Your daughter looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole, and David spent most of the time trying to do damage control with the other parents. Apparently, several people made comments about the importance of family unity and respecting elders. One woman, I think her name was Carol, made quite a speech about how awful it would be to exclude someone who had been so generous. I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from laughing out loud. James, you've outdone yourself. It was my pleasure, Helen. Literally. I don't often get to use my skills for justice instead of just information gathering. This felt righteous. Did you get the pictures I asked asked for? Every moment documented. Jake blowing out his candles, playing with the airplane you sent, hugging the baby goats, everything. I'll email them to you tonight. Thank you. Send me your invoice. Already done. But Helen, I have to ask, what happens next? I considered this. What did happen next? I had made my point, protected my relationship with Jake, and forced some uncomfortable truths into the light, but this was just the beginning. Now we see who calls first, I said. As it turned out, I didn't have to wait long. My doorbell rang at 6:45. I looked through the peephole and saw Sarah standing on my front porch, still in her party dress, her makeup smeared and her hair disheveled. I opened the door. Hi, sweetheart. How was the party? She stared at me for a long moment, then shook her head. May I come in? I stepped aside to let her pass. She walked into my living room and sat heavily on the couch, putting her face in her hands. Margaret flew back to Seattle tonight, she said without looking up. She said she refuses to be part of a family that tolerates such disrespect. I'm sorry to hear that. Sarah's head snapped up. Are you? Are you really sorry? I sat down across from her and met her eye. I'm sorry that Margaret was upset. I'm not sorry that the truth came out. The truth? The truth is that you humiliated me in front of all of Jake's friends' parents. The truth is that you made me look like a terrible daughter. The truth is that you turned my son's birthday party into some kind of public revenge fantasy. No, Sarah, the truth is that I paid $5,000 for a party and was then told I couldn't attend because another grandmother wanted to play family. The truth is that you chose to prioritize Margaret's feelings over mine. The truth is that I got tired of being treated like an ATM instead of a family member. Tears started rolling down her cheek. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. David's family has money. They have connections. Margaret judges everything I do, every choice I make. If she disapproves of how I handle things, it affects David's relationship with his parents. And what about your relationship with your parent? That's different. You're always understanding. You always support me no matter what. Even when that support means writing checks and then stepping aside whenever it's convenient for you? She was quiet for a long moment. I thought you'd understand, she finally whispered. I thought you'd put Jake's happiness first. I did put Jake's happiness first. That's why I paid for his party. But Jake's happiness doesn't require me to disappear from his life whenever Margaret wants to play queen grandmother. She said she won't come to family events if you're going to be there. Then you have a choice to make, don't you? Sarah looked at me with something like panic in her eyes. I can't choose between you and David's family. You already did choose, Sarah. You chose them. I'm just no longer pretending that's acceptable to me. We sat in silence while she processed this. Finally, she spoke. What do you want from me? It was a good question. What did I want? I want to be treated like family instead of a convenient funding source. I want my relationship with my grandson to be respected. I want you to stop acting like my feelings don't matter because I'm always understanding. And if I can't give you that, I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had spent so many years trying to meet other people's expectations that she had lost track of her own values. Then I guess we'll find out what kind of relationship we actually have underneath all the money and convenience. Sarah stood up slowly. I need to think about all this. Take all the time you need. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, Jake had a wonderful time. He kept talking about his Nana Helen and how much you love him. Good. That's what matters most. After she left, I sat in my quiet living room as the sun set outside my windows. My phone buzzed with a text message. James Patterson, photos attached. Also wanted you to know, overheard several parents talking about what a thoughtful grandmother you must be. You made quite an impression. P.S. Kids seemed really happy. I opened the photos and scrolled through them slowly. Jake grinning as he opened my gift. Jake hugging one of the baby goats. Jake blowing out his candles with pure joy on his face. In every single picture, my grandson looked absolutely delighted. That's when I realized I had won something much more valuable than revenge. I had won my dignity back, and Jake had never doubted for a second that his Nana Helen loved him. Everything else was just details. 3 days of silence followed Sarah's visit. Not the angry kind of silence that buzzes with tension, but the peaceful kind that comes when you finally stopped trying to fix something that was never your responsibility to repair. I spent those days reorganizing my life in small but significant ways. I moved my favorite chair to face the window instead of the TV. I bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table, something I hadn't done since my husband died 6 years ago. I made plans to visit my sister in San Francisco, a trip I'd been postponing for months because Sarah might need something. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang, David's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello, David. Helen, we need to talk. His voice had that corporate authority tone he used when he wanted to intimidate someone. Unfortunately for him, I'd been dealing with pompous men since before he was born. Do we? About what? About Saturday. About what you did to my family. I settled into my newly positioned chair and watched a blue jay work on building a nest in the oak tree outside. What exactly did I do to your family? family, David. Don't play innocent. You know exactly what you did. You sent some private investigator to publicly humiliate us at our son's birthday party. I sent a representative to acknowledge my contribution to an event I was no longer welcome to attend. If that felt like humiliation, perhaps you should examine why. You made us look like ungrateful monsters in front of everyone we know. The Blue Jay had found a perfect twig and was carefully maneuvering it into position. Smart bird, knowing exactly what it needed and going after it with purpose. David, I'm curious about something. Whose idea was it to uninvite me? Sarah's or yours? Silence. Then, it was a mutual decision based on what we thought was best for everyone, including me. Look, Helen, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. We're family. We work things out. You're right. We are family, which is why I expected to be treated like family instead of a convenient bank account. That's not fair. You know we appreciate everything you do. I laugh, and not kindly. Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you appreciate my money but not my presence. You appreciate my help but not my feeling. You appreciate my understanding but not my dignity. Jesus, Helen, you're being dramatic. It was one party. No, David. It was 3 years of mortgage help that never got acknowledged. It was birthday gifts and Christmas presents and emergency loans that never got repaid. It was running errands and providing free babysitting and constantly rearranging my life to accommodate yours. The party was just when I finally stopped pretending it was normal. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was harder. Fine. You want to play hardball? Let's talk about access to Jake. My blood went cold, but my voice stayed steady. What about access to Jake? Sarah's been thinking that maybe Jake needs some stability in his life. Maybe he's been getting confused by mixed messages from different family members. The threat was clear as crystal. Cooperate or lose your grandson. David, are you actually threatening to keep me away from Jake unless I continue funding your lifestyle? I'm saying that family relationships require mutual respect, and what you did on Saturday showed a profound lack of respect for us as Jake's parents. I stood up from my chair and walked to the window. The Blue Jay had finished with its twig and was surveying the neighborhood for the next piece of its puzzle. You know what, David? You're absolutely right about mutual respect. So let me ask you something. Do you remember the conversation we had last Christmas about Jake's college fund? What about it? Do you remember how you and Sarah agreed that I should set up an education account for him? How we discussed making me the trustee so the money would be protected? David was quiet. Do you remember signing those papers, David? The ones that give me legal standing as trustee of Jake's education fund? The fund that now contains $47,000 of my money? What are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to play games with access to my grandson, you should probably understand the full scope of what you're threatening. Because that college fund, it requires my signature for any withdrawals. And if I'm not allowed to maintain a relationship with the beneficiary, well, I might have to reconsider whether the fund is being used as intended. The silence stretched so long, I thought he might have hung up. You wouldn't do that to Jake, he finally said. You're right. I wouldn't do anything to hurt Jake, but I also won't continue to be extorted by his parents. So here's what's going to happen, David. You're going to sit down with Sarah and decide whether you want a grandmother who's involved in Jake's life or whether you want to see how well you manage without any of the support I've been providing. Support? Helen, we never asked you to. Oh, but you did ask. Every month when you needed help with the mortgage, every crisis when you needed emergency funds, every time you needed a babysitter or someone to pick Jake up from school or help with birthday parties. You asked and I gave because that's what family does. We're grateful for all of that. No, David, grateful people say thank you and treat their benefactor with respect. What you've been doing is taking my help for granted while treating me like an inconvenience. I could hear him breathing hard. So what do you want from us? I want what I've always wanted. To be treated like family instead of an ATM. To have my relationship with my grandson respected. To not be dismissed whenever it's convenient for someone else. And if we can't give you that, I watched the Blue Jay take flight, probably heading off to find the next piece of its nest. Then I guess you'll find out how expensive it is to maintain your current lifestyle without my help. The next call came from Sarah 2 hours later. She'd obviously been crying. Mom, David told me what you said about the college fund. Did he? And what did you think about that conversation? I think you're using Jake as a weapon against us. I had been expecting this accusation, but it still stung. Sarah, I set up that college fund to secure Jake's future. If you're keeping me away from Jake, then I'm not fulfilling my role as someone invested in his future, am I? That's not the same thing and you know it, isn't it? You're the one who introduced the idea that family access could be conditional. I'm just pointing out that financial support can be conditional too. She was quiet for a moment. Mom, I'm scared. David's talking about moving back to Seattle to be closer to his parents. He says the job market is better there. Ah, there it was, the real reason for the call. When did this conversation start, Sarah? Before or after Saturday's party? After. But Mom, if we move, when would you see Jake? It would just be holidays and maybe summer vacation. That sounds like a decision you and David need to make based on what's best for your family. You don't mean that. I walked to my kitchen and started making tea, needing something to do with my hands. Actually, I do mean it. For years, I've been making decisions based on what was best for your family. Now it's time for you to do the same. But what about Jake? You love him. I love Jake more than anything in this world, which is exactly why I'm not going to continue enabling his parents to treat people badly. What kind of lesson does that teach him about how relationships work? Sarah started crying harder. I don't know how to fix this, Mom. Start by deciding what kind of relationship you actually want with me. Not what's convenient, not what keeps everyone else happy, but what you actually want. I want my mom back. I'm right here, Sarah. I've always been right here, but I'm not going to be taken for granted anymore. What if Margaret really does refuse to come to family events if you're there? I poured hot water over my tea bag and watched the color slowly spread through the clear water. Then, Margaret misses family events. Sarah, you can't build a healthy family by constantly managing other people's unreasonable demands. At some point, you have to decide what your values are and stick to them. It's easy for you to say, you don't have to live with the consequences, don't I? Sweetheart, I've been living with the consequences of trying to keep everyone happy for years. And where did it get me? Uninvited to my own grandson's birthday party. She sniffled. I really messed up, didn't I? You made a choice. We all make choices. The question is what you're going to choose moving forward. David's really angry about the college fund thing. I imagine he is. David's used to having financial security without responsibility. That must be uncomfortable to lose. He said you were manipulating us. I nearly laughed. Sarah, manipulation is when someone uses emotional pressure to get what they want. What I did was set a boundary. There's a difference. I need time to think about everything. Take all the time you need. But Sarah, while you're thinking, remember that Jake is watching all of this. He's learning about how families treat each other, how people handle conflict, how respect works. Make sure the lessons you're teaching him are ones you want him to learn. After I hung up, I called my sister Nancy in San Francisco. Helen, perfect timing. I just put a pot of coffee on. How are you? Actually, Nan, I think I might take you up on that invitation to visit. Would next week work? Of course. What's the occasion? I told her the whole story, from beginning to end. Nancy listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disbelief or outrage. So let me get this straight, she said when I finished. You paid for the party, got uninvited, sent a PI to represent you, and now David's threatening to move to Seattle and take Jake with him? That's about the size of it. Jesus, Helen, these people have some nerve. I'm starting to realize that, yes, good for you for fighting back. Dad would have been proud. Our father had been a quiet man, but he had steel in his spine when it counted. I hadn't thought about him in this context before, but Nancy was right. He never would have tolerated being treated the way I'd been letting Sarah and David treat me. So when do you want to come visit? I'll make your favorite lemon bars. How about this weekend? I could fly down Friday and come back Sunday. Perfect. It'll be good for you to get away from all this drama. Actually, Nan, I don't think there's going to be much more drama. I think I've made my position pretty clear. Oh, honey, you really think they're going to let this go? I considered this. Sarah and David weren't the type to simply accept new boundaries gracefully. They were more likely to escalate before they accepted the new reality. You're right. They're probably not done yet. Just promise me you'll be prepared for whatever they try next. I will. But as I hung up and started packing for San Francisco, I wondered what exactly they could try. I'd already made it clear that my financial support was conditional on basic respect. I'd protected Jake's college fund legally. I'd demonstrated that I wouldn't be quietly pushed aside. What other cards did they have to play? I was about to find out. Friday morning, as I was loading my suitcase into my car for the trip to the airport, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Helen Morrison? The voice was crisp, professional, female. Yes, it is. Mrs. Morrison, this is Detective Linda Chen with the Portland Police Bureau. I need to ask you some questions about an incident that was reported yesterday. My blood turned to ice water. What kind of incident? A harassment complaint was filed against you by a David Caldwell. He's claiming you've been stalking his family and making threats. I sat down hard on my front steps. Detective Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. David is my son-in-law. I'm aware of the family relationship. Mrs. Morrison, that doesn't change the nature of the complaint. Mr. Caldwell alleges that you hired hired someone to show up at a private family event and harass guests, and that you've since been making threatening phone calls about withholding financial support. The audacity was breathtaking. David was trying to criminalize my refusal to be a doormat. Detective, I'd be happy to speak with you about this, but I think you should know that I have documentation of everything that's happened, including recorded phone calls. Recorded calls? Are you saying you've been recording conversations without consent? Oregon is a one-party consent state. Detective, I've been recording conversations since this situation began, to protect myself legally. There was a pause. I see. Would you be willing to come in and discuss this matter? Of course, but I should mention that I was just leaving for San Francisco for the weekend. Could we schedule something for Monday morning? That would be fine. But Mrs. Morrison, I need to advise you to have no contact with the complainant or his family until we've had a chance to discuss this. Understood. After I hung up, I sat on my steps staring at my phone. David had actually called the police on me for standing up for myself. I called James Patterson. Helen, how's retirement from doormat duty treating you? James, I need your help again. David just sicked the police on me. What? The humor vanished from his voice. On what grounds? I explained the situation. James listened, occasionally cursing under his breath. Helen, this is ridiculous. You hired me to attend an event as your representative. That's completely legal. And setting boundaries about your own money isn't threatening behavior. I know that, and you know that. But apparently David thinks he can intimidate me back into compliance by making me deal with legal hassle. Not if I can help. I documented everything Saturday afternoon, including multiple witnesses who can testify that I was professional and non-threatening throughout the event. Plus, I have video footage of the entire interaction. Video footage. Standard practice for this type of work. I wear a small camera for liability protection. Want me to put together a comprehensive report for the detective? Yes, please. And James, could you also compile any information you might have about David's employment history? Something tells me his job loss story might not be as straightforward as they claimed. Now you're thinking like a professional. Give me the weekend, and I'll have everything ready for Monday. I hung up feeling better. David wanted to play hardball? Fine. But he'd picked the wrong grandmother to mess with. My flight to San Francisco was peaceful. 3 hours of forced disconnection from the drama, watching the country pass by below, and thinking about how much my life had changed in just 1 week. Nancy met me at baggage claim with a huge hug and her characteristic, no-nonsense assessment. You look good, Helen. Pissed off, but good. I am pissed off, and for the first time in years, I'm not apologizing for it. We spent the weekend talking, walking through Golden Gate Park, eating good food, and laughing about old times. Nancy had raised 3 kids as a single mother after her husband left when the youngest was still in diapers. She knew something about dealing with people who tried to manipulate you through family obligations. The thing about bullies, she said as we sat in her garden Saturday evening, is that they escalate when their usual tactics stop working. David's trying to scare you back into compliance. Well, it's not working. Good. But Helen, be prepared for him to get creative. Men like David don't like being told no by women they consider beneath them. What do you mean? I mean he sees you as a convenient ATM who got uppity. He's not going to accept that gracefully. Sunday night, as I was packing to fly home, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Mom, please don't go to the police tomorrow. David's willing to drop the complaint if you apologize and agree to family counseling. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. I'll see Detective Chen as scheduled. If David wants to drop his false complaint, that's his choice. Sarah immediately called. Mom, please, this is getting out of hand. Can't we just go back to how things were? No, Sarah, we can't. How things were wasn't working for me. But the police, Mom. It doesn't have to go that far. I agree completely. It didn't have to go that far. But David chose to escalate it by filing a false police report. Now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice. He's just scared about the money situation. You know how he gets when he's stressed. Sarah, listen to yourself. You're making excuses for a man who tried to have your mother arrested for standing up for herself. Silence. If you stay on David's side in this, she finally said, I don't know what's going to happen to our relationship. And there it was. The final ultimatum. Choose David or lose your daughter. Sarah, I love you, but I'm not going to let myself be abused to maintain a relationship with you. If David's more important to you than treating your mother with basic respect, then I guess we'll find out what that means for our relationship. Mom, don't do this. I'm not doing anything. Sweetheart, I'm simply refusing to undo it. Monday morning at 9 a.m., I sat in Detective Chen's office with a folder full of documentation and James Patterson by my side as a witness. Detective Chen was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a manner that suggested she'd heard every story in the book. Mrs. Morrison, I've reviewed Mr. Caldwell's complaint, and I have to say, some of his allegations seem unusual. How so? Well, for instance, he claims you hired someone to stalk his family, but the event coordinator at Riverside confirms that you notified them in advance that you were sending a representative to an event you had funded. That's not stalking. James James leaned forward. Detective, I have video documentation of the entire interaction. At no point did I behave inappropriately or make any threats. I simply answered questions about why I was there. I've seen the footage, Mr. Patterson. Very professional work. She turned back to me. Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Caldwell also claims you've been making threatening phone calls about withholding financial support. I pulled out my phone. I have recordings of all our conversations, Detective. I never made threats. I simply informed him that my financial support was conditional on being treated with respect. May I hear those recordings? I played the relevant portions of my conversations with both David and Sarah. Detective Chen listened carefully, taking notes. Mr. Caldwell seems to have a very different interpretation of these conversations than what I'm hearing, she said when I finished. David's used to getting his way through intimidation, I said. When that stopped working, he tried to use you to intimidate me instead. Detective Chen nodded slowly. Mrs. Morrison, based on what I've reviewed, I don't see any evidence of harassment or stalking. What I do see is a family dispute over financial boundaries. So the complaint will be dismissed? The complaint will be closed as unfounded. However, I do want to advise you that family conflicts can escalate quickly. If you feel unsafe at any point, please don't hesitate to call us. James and I left the police station and went for coffee to debrief. How are you feeling? He asked, vindicated, but also worried about what David might try next. Actually, Helen, I have some information that might interest you. You asked me to look into David's employment history? What did you find? James pulled out a folder. Well, for starters, his job loss wasn't due to budget cuts. He was fired for falsifying expense reports. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? It gets better. This is the third job he's lost for similar reasons. The first two companies declined to pursue criminal charges in exchange for quiet resignations, but his current employer isn't being as generous. Meaning David Caldwell is currently under investigation for embezzlement. Has been for 3 weeks, since before Jake's birthday party. The pieces clicked into place. The desperation to maintain appearances, the pressure from Margaret about financial stability, the increasing demands for my support. Does Sarah know? I doubt it. David's been very careful to present this as a routine layoff, but the investigation is ongoing, and if charges are filed, it'll become public record. James, I need copies of everything you found. Way ahead of you. He handed me a thick envelope. Consider it insurance, in case David decides to escalate further. That evening, Sarah called. Mom, Detective Chen told David she was closing the complaint. Thank you for not pressing charges. I never had any intention of pressing charges. Sarah, I was just defending myself against a false accusation. David feels terrible about the whole thing. He wants to apologize. Does he? Or do you want him to apologize? Pause. I want him to apologize. But Mom, there's something else. We need to talk. What about? Not over the phone. Can I come over? An hour later, Sarah sat in my living room looking more serious than I'd seen her in years. Mom, I found some things in David's office. Financial documents that don't make sense. I waited. I think he's been lying about the job situation. There are letters from lawyers and documents about some kind of investigation. What are you going to do? I don't know. I confronted him, and he said it was all a misunderstanding that would be cleared up soon. But Mom, if he's in real legal trouble, you'll handle it the same way you've handled everything else. You'll figure out what's best for you and Jake. She looked at me with something like desperation. I can't do this alone. You're not alone, Sarah, but you're also not a victim. You're a grown woman with choices to make. What if I've made all the wrong choices? Then you make better ones going forward. She was quiet for a long time. Mom, if I left David, would you help me? The question hung in the air between us. Sarah, I'll always be here for you if you need genuine help, but I'm not going back to being a solution to problems you could solve yourself. What does that mean? It means if you need a safe place to stay while you figure things out, my door is open. If you need help with Jake while you get back on your feet, I'm here, but I'm not going to fund another lifestyle or solve problems that are yours to solve. She nodded slowly. That's fair, is it? Because 3 weeks ago, you would have called that cruel. 3 weeks ago, I was still trying to keep everyone happy instead of facing the truth. And what's the truth? Sarah looked me straight in the eye. The truth is that I let my husband treat my mother like garbage because it was easier than standing up to him. The truth is that I've been a terrible daughter. Sarah, no, let me finish. The truth is that you raised me better than this, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what you taught me about standing up for myself and the people I love. I felt tears prick my eyes. The truth is that I want my mom back, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn that, even if it means choosing me over David, especially if it means choosing you over David. 2 weeks later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee and watching my grandson build a fort out of couch cushions in the living room. Sarah sat at my kitchen table with legal documents spread in front of her, a pen in her hand and determination on her face. Are you sure about this? I asked, bringing her a cup of coffee. I'm sure. David can fight the divorce if he wants, but he'll be doing it while under criminal investigation for embezzlement. My lawyer says that gives us significant leverage for custody and financial arrangements. Jake poked his head up from behind the couch. Nana, is Mom really really going to live here with us? For a while, sweetheart, until she finds a place of her own. Cool. Can we have pancakes for breakfast every day? Sarah laughed. Let's start with just weekends, buddy. The past 2 weeks had moved quickly. David's embezzlement charges had been filed publicly, making his legal troubles impossible to hide. Margaret had distanced herself from the scandal so fast it left skid marks, suddenly unavailable for phone calls and canceling her planned visit. Sarah had filed for divorce and temporary custody, moved back into my spare bedroom with Jake, and started looking for work. David was currently staying in a hotel while his lawyer tried to work out a plea deal. There's something I need to tell you, Sarah said, signing the last document. About the money. What money? All of it. The mortgage payments, the party, everything. I want to pay you back. I sat down across from her. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Not all at once, I know I can't do that. But I want to set up a payment plan. Real payments, not just promises. Why? Because I need to know that our relationship isn't built on me taking advantage of your generosity. I need to know that I can contribute something meaningful to this family. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The woman sitting at my table was different from the one who had uninvited me to Jake's party. Stronger, more honest, more like the girl I had raised. Okay, but we do it properly. A written agreement, realistic terms, no guilt if you need to modify it for legitimate reasons. Deal. Jake appeared at my elbow. Nana, can we call Grandpa Richard? I want to tell him about my new room. Sarah and I both froze. Richard was my ex-husband, Sarah's father, who lived across the country and maintained minimal contact with any of us. Sweetheart, I said carefully, what made you think of calling Grandpa Richard? David said that since he's not my dad anymore, maybe I could have a different grandfather, someone nicer. I looked at Sarah, who shrugged. It's not a terrible idea. Dad always regretted not being more involved when Sarah was growing up. We could try, I agreed. But Jake, remember that relationships take time to build. Grandpa Richard might need some time to figure out how to be a grandfather. That's okay. I'm good at teaching people how to be family. I taught you how to make the best pillow forts. Sarah reached over and ruffled his hair. Yes, you did. My phone rang. James Patterson. Helen, I wanted to give you an update on the David situation. I walked into the other room for privacy. What's the latest? He took a plea deal. 18 months probation, full restitution, community service, no jail time, but the felony conviction means he'll have trouble finding work in finance. How's he taking it? About as well as you'd expect. His lawyer called me yesterday, asking if you'd be willing to provide a character reference for him. I almost laughed. That's rich. I told him I'd pass along the request, but I didn't think you'd be interested. You thought right. There's something else. Margaret Caldwell has been asking questions about the divorce proceeding. Apparently, she's considering trying to get visitation rights to Jake. On what grounds? I don't know yet, but I wanted you to be aware. After I hung up, I went back to the kitchen. Sarah was putting the legal documents in order, her movements efficient and purposeful. Who was that? She asked. I told her about David's plea deal and Margaret's potential legal action. Let her try, Sarah said firmly. After the way she treated you, after the way she encouraged David's behavior, she has no moral standing to demand access to my son. Are you sure you're ready for another legal battle? Mom, I'm ready for whatever it takes to protect my family. The real family that actually cares about each other. That evening, after Jake was in bed, Sarah and I sat on my back deck with glasses of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Do you think I made the right choice? She asked. Which choice? All of them. Leaving David, moving back here, starting over at 38. I considered this. Sarah, I think you made the honest choice, maybe for the first time in years. I keep thinking about what you said, about Jake watching all of this, learning lessons about how families treat each other. What lessons do you think he's learning now? That people who love you don't try to control you. That money doesn't buy relationships. That it's never too late to do the right thing, even if it's hard. Those sound like good lessons to me. She was quiet for a moment. Mom, I'm sorry for all of it, for taking advantage of your kindness, for choosing David over you, for letting him treat you like you didn't matter. Sarah, you don't need to apologize anymore. You've already shown me you're sorry by changing your actions. I want to be the daughter you deserve. I reached over and took her hand. Sweetheart, you already are. We sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. From inside the house, I could hear the soft sound of Jake's breathing through his open bedroom window. You know what's funny? Sarah said. What? Margaret thought she could push you out of Jake's life by claiming to be the better grandmother. And instead, she pushed herself out. Jake barely mentions her anymore, but he talks about you every day, about how brave you are, how you stood up for yourself, how you always keep your promises. I smiled. Well, Margaret did teach us all something valuable. What's that? That sometimes the people who try to diminish you are the ones who end up revealing just how strong you really are. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of pancakes sizzling on the griddle and Jake's laughter echoing through my house. Sarah was at the stove, flipping pancakes with the ease of someone who belonged exactly where she was. Good morning, Nana, Jake called out. Mom's making your favorite kind, blueberry pancakes, Sarah had remembered. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, accepting the hug he launched at me. "Today's gonna be the best day," he announced. "Mom doesn't have to go to work, you don't have to be sad anymore, and we're all together." I looked at Sarah over his head. She was smiling, but there were tears in her eyes. "You know what, Jake?" I said. "I think you're absolutely right." And for the first time in years, I truly was. 3 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Margaret Caldwell was marrying a man named Robert Henderson, a widower with substantial assets, and according to the invitation, a heart large enough for a ready-made family. I showed the invitation to Sarah, who snorted with laughter. "Well, that explains why she's been so quiet about custody. She's got bigger fish to fry. Should we send a gift?" I asked, though my tone made it clear what I thought about that idea. "Oh, absolutely," Sarah said with a grin that reminded me of my own sense of humor. "Let's send them a lovely card, wishing them all the happiness they deserve." And we did. The card was beautiful, tasteful, and signed simply, "Wishing you exactly what you deserve. The Morrison family. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and telling the truth." Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.